A paranormal romance audiobook. 10 minutes, Veila. Valcar's voice slid through the operating room, calm enough to sound merciful. Veila did not look up from the huge white wolf on the table, then stopped talking and let me work. A monitor shrieked and stuttered. The wolf's chest barely rose. Valcar stepped closer. He wore a tailored coat, human face, human hands, but his shadow on the wall stretched into a horned shape that did not belong to any man. "If he dies," Valcar said, "I will throw your sister into the kennel." There was no sister, they both knew it. The lie was the point. Veila kept her scalpel steady. "Clamp!" Assistants froze like prey. One backed away so fast a tray hit the floor. Veila snapped, "Either help or leave." They scattered. She leaned into the wound. Black veins crawled under the wolf's pale skin, a sick ink stain. Mortesia, Valcar's poison. It ate flesh and smothered regeneration. The heart faltered under her fingers. Veila cut deeper, too close to the heart for anyone with a normal survival instinct. Blood sprayed her cheek, warm and bright. She did not blink. Suction. A shaking tube appeared. Veila slid a needle into the heart muscle and pushed her own mixture, adrenaline refined until it burned, and a thin shimmer of silver that looked like trapped moonlight. The heart kicked. The monitor steadied. The room exhaled. Veila stitched fast, decisive, merciless. The wolf's breathing returned, ragged but present. "Good," Valcar murmured. She felt him behind her, too close. His fingers slid into her hair and lifted it off her neck. Metal glinted where skin should have been. The obedience collar was fused into her, a ring with edges that bit. Valcar kissed the metal. Cold, possessive. Veila's stomach turned. "Tomorrow is the full moon," he said. "You will give me an heir. Your body will cooperate even if your mind screams." Veila forced her voice flat. "The patient is stable." "So are you," Valcar said. For now, he left without haste, as if the entire Citadel was his heartbeat. When the doors sealed, Veila's hands began to shake. She washed blood from her face. Red spiraled down the drain like a warning. In the mirror, her eyes looked too awake. "In this world, I am either a doctor or a bed," she whispered. "I chose the first." She walked out of the operating theater with steady steps, because in the Citadel, panic had a scent. Her lab sat behind a coded door. Everything inside was clean in the way only fear could maintain. She reached into the ventilation duct and pulled out a small sealed case. A syringe lay inside, labeled 0. 12 hours without an omega scent, 12 hours of being a blank space. Veila pressed the needle into her thigh. Fire tore through her veins. She bit her lip until she tasted blood and swallowed the scream. The familiar sweetness of her scent collapsed, gone so suddenly it felt like losing a limb. She did not have time to mourn it. Veila opened her medical tablet and slipped into the Citadel camera grid. Valcar trusted walls more than people. Walls were easier to own. Her fingers moved like a prayer. Loop the feed, copy the timestamps. Mask the corridor, green confirmation. A siren wailed, her heart stopped. Then the intercom announced a diversion in another wing, a blast contained, a drill, the Citadel eating its own chaos. Luck. Veila slipped into the service corridor. She did not run. Running made guards look. She walked past patrols, past silver-eyed sentries, past alphas who sniffed the air and found nothing to chase. 0 made her invisible, and invisibility made her furious. She passed a caged Omega being dragged by the wrist. The girl's eyes met Veila's for half a second, pleading. Veila kept walking. If she stopped now, both of them would die. Heat rolled from the incinerator bay, chemical smoke and burned tissue. She moved to the bio-waste chute. The hatch was locked. Her scalpel pried. A stolen card beeped. The hatch opened. Darkness yawned. Veila hesitated only long enough to picture Valcar's mouth on her collar and the full moon waiting like a knife. Then she climbed in. The tube was slick with horror. Bones pressed against her knees. Something soft and cold slid along her palm. The stench made her gag. She crawled anyway. Far above, more waste dropped, the chute vibrating like a throat swallowing evidence. Her shoulders burned. Her lungs screamed. She forced her mind to count breaths instead of minutes. At last, the tube spat her out into rain. She hit mud in a Lower Umbra alley, shaking and filthy neon reflections trembling in puddles. Skyscrapers rose above like steel fangs. Drones hummed somewhere in the storm. Veila pushed up, soaked and shivering. A man slept under an awning. She stole his cloak and pulled the hood low. Rain washed grime from her skin, but not the memory of the chute. She tried to listen for pursuit. Only the city answered, a constant growl of engines, distant sirens, and hungry music from underground clubs. High in the Citadel, Valcar entered her room. No scent, no body. His hand closed on a steel table. Metal screamed as he bent it like paper. His roar rolled across Umbra City. Find her. Alive. Veila did not hear it with her ears, but the hairs on her arms lifted as if the city had exhaled his rage into the rain. She moved through the slums, past market stalls and broken hollow signs, past hungry faces and tired eyes that had learned not to feel. A search drone drifted overhead, lenses blinking. Veila ducked into a stairwell and held her breath until it passed. Zero held. Invisibility felt like safety and like death. It also felt like hunger. Her stomach clenched, empty and sour. She had not eaten since dawn. She stole a protein bar from a vendor's tray, slid away before he noticed, and forced it down while walking. The taste was ash. Another drone swept low, closer this time. A hound model built to track scent. Veila's heart slammed. The drone hovered, confused, its sensors whining. No Omega trail, no target. It drifted away. Veila nearly laughed from relief and wanted to cry from it. A roar rose ahead, the sound of a crowd feeding on violence. A sign flickered over a basement entrance. Abyss. Veila turned toward it because the street was too open. Inside, heat and sweat slammed into her. Red lights strobed, bodies packed around a pit. Two werewolves fought below, fists and claws, blood on concrete. Veila tried to leave. Then she saw the loser. His throat was torn open. He gurgled, eyes rolling, the crowd screaming for him to finish dying. No one moved to help. Veila's oath, buried under years of fear, clawed its way up. She shoved through the bodies and dropped beside him. "Hold him," she ordered. Laughter, then hesitation. A broad-shouldered man with beta eyes stepped closer, expression sharp. "You want to die here, stranger?" "I want him to live," Veila said. He barked an order. Two fighters pinned the wounded wolf. Veila grabbed a cheap bottle of vodka from the nearest table and poured it into the wound. The wolf howled. She shoved cloth between his teeth and used a stapler from her pocket. Click, click, click. The blood slowed. Breathing returned, thin but real. The crowd's roar fell into a stunned silence. Somebody spat on the floor as if disgusted by mercy. Somebody else clapped once uncertain. Then the noise rose again, louder, hungry for the next injury. The beta owner stared at Veila like she was an unexpected weapon. "You are insane," he said, "or brilliant, name." "No," Veila said. He smiled like someone who liked risks. "Orin, owner." Veila wiped her hands on her cloak. "You should pay your fighters better. You are running out." Orin chuckled, then leaned in. "You are not from Lower Umbra. You smell clean even when you are filthy." "I smell like nothing," Veila said, and hated that it sounded like grief. Orin's gaze flicked to the stairs as if he heard something Veila did not. "You should go," he said. Veila started backing away. Orin added softer, "If Kairos sees you, do not resist. He likes resistance." Veila frowned. "Kairos is who?" The air thickened. Gravity pressed down like a warning. A path opened in the crowd as if fear had teeth. An alpha walked through it, not polished, not obedient, scarred, lethal, and wild enough to make the room feel smaller. His eyes glowed gold in the dark. Orin muttered, "Kairos." Kairos's gaze swept the pit. "Valcar's spy is here," he said. Veila's pulse turned to ice. Kairos followed Orin's glance to her stolen cloak. In a blink, his hand closed around her throat and lifted her off the floor. Veila clawed at his wrist. His skin felt like stone. "Say your name," he growled. "I am a doctor," she choked. His grip tightened slightly, not crushing, reminding. Veila saw the crowd watching with the same excitement they used for fights. Kairos leaned in, inhaled, and froze. "Why do you smell like nothing?" he said. Confusion flashed across his face, sharp and fast. Veila felt it too, a strange electric prickle between their bodies, like the air recognized them even if scent did not. Kairos's gaze searched her face as if he expected the lie to be written on her skin. Veila used the moment. A scalpel from her sleeve, a desperate strike at his shoulder. The blade snapped against his skin. Kairos laughed, pleased. "I like that," he said. Veila forced air into her lungs. "Let me go." Kairos's gaze dropped, catching the blood on her hands. Then it slid to his own side where dark staining spread under his coat. Veila smelled it even through zero, faint and bitter. Mortesia. "You are poisoned," she said. Kairos's smile vanished. "No." "Yes," Veila said. "Your body is fighting, but the poison is learning. It always does." Kairos lowered her until her boots touched the floor, but his hand stayed at her throat. "How do you know?" he asked. Veila swallowed. "I have seen it under a surgeon's light. Black veins, gray tissue, alphas who stop healing." Orin shifted, uneasy. Kairos's eyes locked on Veila. "Fix me." "Sit," Veila said. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Kairos's mouth curved. "No one orders me." "Then die standing," Veila said. For a beat, he looked almost impressed. Then his hand struck the side of her neck, darkness. She woke to silence that smelled expensive. Concrete ceiling, exposed beams, thick glass holding back the city. A penthouse loft. For a heartbeat, she thought she had died and been dragged into a cleaner version of hell. Veila tried to rise and felt the ache in her skull. Kairos sat across the room, watching her like a question that could become a sentence. He tossed a med kit onto the couch. "Heal me. If I die, my wolves will tear you apart." Veila's throat tightened. "If I wanted you dead, I would have let Mortesia finish its meal." Kairos's smile was thin. "Then we agree I need you." She glanced at the windows, too high, too many security locks. A door at the far end had a biometric scanner. She swung her legs off the couch anyway. Kairos's voice followed her, lazy and sharp. Do not test the locks. The last person who tried lost 3 fingers. Veila stopped. You cut them off. No, Kairos said. The locks did, they are loyal. Veila turned her head. Loyal to you? Loyal to what I pay them, he corrected. She forced herself back to the med kit. Where is the wound? She asked. Kairos shrugged off his coat. Bare to the waist, scars mapped his skin. On his back, faint marks like burns and restraints. Veila's throat tightened. Another survivor of Valcar. You were in the Citadel, she said before she could stop herself. Kairos's eyes narrowed. Once. And you escaped, Veila said. No, he replied. I was thrown out. It is different. Veila did not ask why. She knew the kind of game Valcar played with discarded monsters. Kairos lifted his arm, revealing a soaked bandage at his ribs. Veila peeled it back, gray flesh, rotting edges. The smell of Mortesia filled the room like a curse. She worked, cutting dead tissue, flushing, stitching, doing violence with precision. Kairos barely flinched. When her fingers pressed close to his ribs, his breath hitched. Not pain, something else. Veila forced her voice clinical. Do not move. Kairos leaned closer, his breath warm against her temple. You like giving orders. Veila planted her palm on his chest, right over his heart. I like keeping patients alive. Try me and I let you bleed. His body went still. The gold in his eyes flared, then settled. Veila finished the last stitch and tied it off. Kairos flexed, testing. Better, he admitted. Not cured, Veila said. Mortesia is inside you. I need silver, clean supplies, and time to slow it. Kairos watched her as if time was something he did not trust. You will get both, he said. He crossed the room and opened a locked cabinet. Inside were medical instruments, sealed and clean. Veila stared. You keep a med cabinet, she said. My pack bleeds, Kairos replied. I prefer them alive. He tossed her a small pouch. It chimed softly. Silver. Veila's fingers closed around it. You planned this. Kairos's gaze flicked to her mouth, then away as if angry at himself. I plan everything. Veila swallowed, throat tight. Then plan my freedom. Kairos's expression went hard. Outside these walls, Valcar's drones will pick you apart. If you want to live, you stay. Veila hated that she believed him. In exchange, Kairos added, you are protected. Protected. A pretty word for caged. Veila thought of the slums, the hound drones, Valcar's shadow. Fine, she said, but you do not touch me. Kairos paused as if her words had teeth. If I wanted to touch you, he said quietly, you would not be standing. He left her with that promise hanging in the air. The next day, Kairos introduced her to his pack, scarred wolves with wary eyes, fighters and runners, people who had learned to survive outside Valcar's law. Veila wore baggy clothes and kept her hood up. She kept her name locked behind her teeth. A wolf with a split lip tested her with a glare. Veila met it without flinching. A man with a broken hand scoffed when she reached for him. I heal with teeth, he said. Veila twisted his wrist just enough to make him gasp. Then do it again and I said it wrong. He stared, then laughed. Somewhere behind them, Kairos's low chuckle rumbled like approval. A woman stepped forward, beautiful in a way that felt sharpened. Silena, she said, gaze sliding to Kairos. So this is what replaces me? Kairos's jaw tightened. Do not. Silena's smile did not soften. Does the doctor have a name? Call me when you are bleeding, Veila replied. A few wolves laughed. Silena's eyes went colder. Days blurred into work. Veila stitched bite marks, reset bones, drained abscesses. She cleaned infection from wounds that had been ignored until rot threatened to spread. People began to bring her food without being asked. A young runner left a cup of hot broth outside her door and vanished before she could thank him. An older beta nodded at her with something like respect. They started calling her healer. Veila pretended the title did not matter. It did. Kairos watched her from corners, pretending it was strategy. Sometimes his gaze felt like a hand. Sometimes he stepped in close during treatments, looming over her shoulder, and she could feel his body's awareness of hers like heat. Zero should have kept her safe, but Zero also made her body feel wrong. Her skin tingled. Her senses blurred at the edges. At night, she lay awake, listening to the city, and wondered what it meant to be scentless. Was she still herself, or just a tool that had finally learned how to hide? On the third night, Silena cornered her in the supply room. The shelves smelled of antiseptic and metal. Silena stood too close, eyes glittering. He does not keep strays, Silena said softly. He keeps weapons. Veila did not step back. Then I am exactly what he needs. Silena's smile sharpened. He does not need you. He needs obedience. Veila's fingers tightened around a roll of bandage. I do not do obedience. Silena leaned in as if sharing a secret. He will break you anyway, they always do. Veila's voice went cold. Not all of them. Silena's gaze flicked quick to Veila's neck as if she knew something lived under the skin. Be careful, Silena whispered. Mortesia is not the only poison in this city. She left. Veila checked her supplies after. A vial sat among her antibiotics. Correct label. Wrong color. The faint bitter stench hit her. Mortesia. Veila carried the vial in her fist until her knuckles ached. Then she walked straight into the main hall. The pack gathered there, eating, talking, sharpening blades. Kairos leaned near a window, watching Umbra City as if he held it by the throat. Veila lifted the vial. Someone wants your pack dead, she said. Silence. Silena turned, too calm. You accuse without proof. Veila held the vial up. This poison has a smell. You think I cannot recognize what Valcar makes? Kairos's attention snapped to Silena. Silena's composure cracked. She is unnatural, she hissed, pointing at Veila. No scent, no rank, nothing, that is Valcar's work. The pack shifted, hands on weapons. Veila kept her chin up, pulse hammering. Kairos's voice cut through the tension. Enough! He stepped toward Silena, eyes hard. You tried to poison my people. Silena's eyes went wet. I was protecting you. You were protecting your place, Kairos said. Two wolves seized Silena. Silena fought, screaming. As they dragged her away, she twisted and spat at Veila. He will tear you apart when he learns what you are. Veila stood still until the door slammed. Only then did her hands start to shake. Kairos came closer. You smell like nothing, he said quietly. Veila's mouth went dry. I told you. Kairos stared at her as if he could see through skin and bone. No one smells like nothing without a reason. Veila forced a shrug. Medicine. Kairos's gaze lingered on her throat. If Valcar did this, he said, I will carve him open. Veila's stomach flipped. The threat should have terrified her. It felt like warmth. That night, she locked herself in the bathroom and turned the shower on hot enough to sting. Steam filled the air. Water pounded her shoulders. For a few minutes, she could pretend she was only a woman, not a hunted omega, not a surgical tool in a tyrant's hands. Then the heat inside her sharpened. A pulse low in her belly. A sweetness under her skin. Zero failed. Her scent returned in a rush, vanilla and cold steel filling the small room like a confession. Veila turned the water colder, desperate. Too late. Heavy footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle moved. "Do not," Veila said, voice thin. The door burst open. Kairos stood in the doorway, eyes blown wide, pupils swallowing the gold. His chest rose with a sharp inhale. "What is that?" he said. "Get out," Veila snapped, clutching the towel tighter. Kairos stepped in anyway, drawn like a star pulls debris. His gaze dragged over her, then snapped to her neck. The towel had slipped just enough. Metal caught the light. The collar. Kairos went very still. Fury rolled off him, hot enough to burn the steam. "You belong to him," he said. "No," Veila whispered. Kairos crossed the tiles in 2 steps and slammed his hand beside her head, pinning her to the wall without touching her throat. His other hand gripped her waist, too tight. "Did Valcar touch you?" he growled. Veila's eyes burned. "He owned me. He tried." The words tasted like bile. Kairos's jaw flexed. Desire and rage fought in him, visible in the tremor of his hands. Veila could feel it too, her body answering in betrayal, the heat in her blood making her too aware of his proximity. She hated that part of herself. She hated how alive it made her feel. Veila lifted her chin, forcing breath into her lungs. "I ran. I am not his thing." A tear slipped down her cheek. Kairos stared at the tear as if it shocked him. His grip loosened. He stepped back, breathing hard as if afraid of what he wanted. "I will remove it," he said. Veila's stomach clenched. "It cannot be removed." "Everything can be removed," Kairos said. He came closer again, slower now. "If I hurt you," he said, voice rough, "tell me, I stop." The simple offer felt unreal. Veila swallowed. "Do it." His fingers brushed the collar. Pain sparked through Veila's nerves. "It will hurt," he said. "It always hurts," Veila whispered. Kairos's hand slid behind her neck, steadying her. Power pressed into the metal. The collar whined. White pain tore through her. Veila's mouth opened, but the scream caught in her throat. Kairos's forehead hovered near hers. "Look at me. Breathe." Veila forced her eyes open. His gaze held her, fierce and focused. The collar cracked. Warm blood slid down her skin. With one final twist, the mechanism snapped. Metal fell into Kairos's palm. Veila sagged against the tile, shaking, lungs dragging in air like she had been drowning for years. Kairos stared at the raw mark on her neck. His fingers touched it gently. The tenderness made her shiver more than the pain. "You are free," he said. Veila laughed once, broken. "Free is just another way to be hunted." A distant whine cut through the city noise. Kairos's head snapped toward the window. "Down," he snapped. The wall exploded. Concrete and glass blasted inward. Smoke filled the bathroom. A shriek of metal. Kairos threw himself over Veila, shielding her with his body. Through the ruined wall, sleek black drones hovered like carrion. Veila's blood turned to ice. Valcar. Kairos wrapped her in a blanket and hauled her out into the burning penthouse. Alarms screamed. Fire blossomed where rockets hit. The building shook. Kairos shoved her behind a pillar and ripped a handgun from a drawer. He fired twice. A drone sparked and fell, screaming down into the night. Another drone fired, punching holes through concrete. Dust filled Veila's mouth. Kairos grabbed her wrist. "Move!" They ran through the loft. A beam collapsed behind them. Heat licked at Veila's back. She stumbled, barefoot, blanket dragging. Kairos lifted her without slowing, carrying her like she was the only thing that mattered. The realization hit Veila like a punch. No one had ever carried her to save her. The elevator hall was half destroyed. Smoke poured from the shaft. A drone swept in through a shattered window, its lens locking on Veila. A mechanical voice crackled. "Property located." Veila's stomach dropped. Kairos's snarl was pure animal. He grabbed a metal bar and slammed it into the drone. Sparks burst like angry fireflies. It fell. Another drone circled outside, aiming. Kairos looked at the open shaft. "Hold on," he said. Veila barely managed "no" before he lifted her and jumped. The drop stole her breath. Wind screamed. Kairos dug claws into the wall, slowing them in brutal jolts. They hit a maintenance ledge hard. Ledge buckled. They fell again, then a roar of collapsing metal swallowed everything. Veila came to in dim emergency glow. Chunks of concrete and beams pinned them in a pocket of space inside the shaft. Kairos lay beside her, blood on his temple, breathing harsh. Veila tried to move and pain flared in her ribs. Dust coated her tongue. "Kairos," she whispered. His eyes opened, gold, furious, alive. Alive! The space shifted with a slow, settling groan. Kairos reached toward a slab of concrete, then stopped. "If we move wrong, it collapses." Veila forced her breathing steady. The air already felt thin, eaten by fire above. She swallowed and felt another problem rising inside her. Shock, fear, her scent thickening, heat. Her body chose the worst moment to remember it was an omega. Veila pressed her thighs together, trembling. "Do not touch me," she said, voice strained. Kairos's nostrils flared. He could smell her now, strong in the cramped space. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped. "I will not," he said, each word dragged out like it cost him. Veila stared at him, an alpha trapped with an omega in heat, and he was saying no to his own instincts. It should not have mattered. It mattered. Above them, somewhere in the shaft, a drone engine whined, searching. The emergency light flickered. Veila's breath shook. "How long until they find us?" Kairos's gaze stayed on her mouth as if it betrayed him. "Long enough," he said, then quieter, like a confession to the dark. "Or not long enough at all." The emergency light flickered again, weaker, like the building was getting tired of pretending it still cared. Dust floated in slow spirals, turning the small pocket of space into a dim snow globe of concrete and ash. Veila pressed her back to the wall, blanket tight around her shoulders, trying to make herself smaller than her own scent. It filled the air anyway, sweet and sharp, vanilla cut with something metallic that made the back of her throat ache. Heat rolled through her in waves that felt humiliating and inevitable, as if her body had picked this moment to betray her because it knew she had nowhere to run. Kairos sat opposite her, one knee drawn up, forearm braced against it. Blood dried at his temple. His breathing was controlled, but his eyes were too bright, too hungry, fixed on a point just past her mouth as if looking directly at her would crack the last piece of restraint he had left. Veila swallowed, and the sound felt loud. "You promised," she whispered. His jaw tightened. I am still promising. A distant scrape echoed up the elevator shaft, metal shifting, something hunting above them. The drone whine returned, faint, then closer, then fading again as if confused by the debris and the lack of signal. Veila forced air into her lungs slowly, tasting smoke. How much oxygen is left? Kairos listened, head tilted slightly, as if he could hear the air itself running out. Not enough for panic. Veila let out a tight laugh that turned into a shaky breath. That is not helpful. It is true, he said. He lifted his gaze to her neck. The raw, bloody mark where the collar had been looked like a wound and a halo at once. His expression hardened. It should not have been inside you. Veila stared at him. You think I asked for it? I know you did not. His voice dropped. That is why it makes me want to tear the city apart. The heat surged again, and Veila's thighs pressed together involuntarily. She hated the way her body reacted to him, to his scent, to the sheer force of him in this tiny space. She hated that part of her wanted comfort from the one person who could ruin her with a touch. She looked away. Do not talk like that. Like what? Like I matter. Silence stretched. Dust continued to drift. Kairos exhaled once, sharp. You stitched my wolf on a floor full of people who would have cheered if he died. You crossed the line between alive and dead with a stapler and vodka and did not blink. Then you looked at me and told me to die standing. That is not nothing. Veila's throat tightened. That is survival. It is courage. His eyes narrowed. You confuse them because it is safer. A groan rolled through the shaft deeper, like the building shifting its weight. Small pieces of rubble tumbled near their feet. Veila flinched. If this collapses, we die. Kairos's gaze snapped to the debris above them. Do not move. I was not moving. You were shaking. Veila's nails dug into the blanket. I cannot stop. My body is doing it. Kairos looked away as if forcing himself to remember the shape of distance. Then, slowly, he took out a small knife from his boot. The blade caught the emergency glow. Veila tensed. What are you doing? Kairos dragged the blade across his palm. A clean cut. Blood welled up, dark and hot. Veila sucked in a breath. Are you insane? Kairos held the bleeding hand low, away from her, but close enough that the scent of fresh blood punched through the smoke. His voice was rough. Pain helps. Veila stared at him, horrified, and then something in her chest shifted. A strange ache that was not heat, not fear, something softer, something that made her eyes sting. You are doing this so you do not touch me, she said. Kairos did not answer immediately. He stared at his own blood as if it disgusted him. I am doing it so you do not think I am him. Veila's breath shook. You are still an alpha. His gaze snapped up. And you are still alive. Another scrape echoed, closer. The drone again, searching, a faint mechanical click like a lens adjusting. Kairos went still. He tilted his head, listening. Veila whispered, "It found us." Kairos's lips pulled back slightly, a flash of teeth. Not yet. The drone whine moved past, above them, then faded. Veila sagged, relief turning her knees weak. In the next breath, the heat surged again, stronger. Her stomach clenched. Her skin felt too tight, too sensitive. She pressed her forehead to her knees, trying to breathe through it. Kairos shifted just an inch and the rubble creaked. He froze again. Do not curl like that. It changes the weight distribution. Veila lifted her head, eyes wet. Then what am I supposed to do? Sit here and want things I hate myself for wanting. Kairos's eyes flared gold. His voice dropped into something almost gentle, which was somehow more dangerous than his threats. You are supposed to survive. Veila laughed again, broken. Survive with dignity. Kairos's gaze held hers. Dignity is a luxury. Survival is a decision. Veila stared at him, and for a moment she could not tell which part of her was shaking from fear, which part from heat, and which part from the fact that he was bleeding himself to keep a promise. The emergency light flickered, then steadied dimmer. Hours passed in pieces. Sometimes Veila drifted, not fully asleep, just slipping into a fog where the heat became a distant drumbeat and the fear blurred into something manageable. Every time she surfaced, Kairos was still there, watching, breathing slow, holding himself like a blade held by sheer will. At one point, she realized she was leaning sideways, her shoulder pressed against his arm. She jolted upright. Kairos did not move. His voice came out low. "You fell. I did not mean to. I know." Veila swallowed. You could have taken advantage. Kairos's laugh was one breath, bitter. If I wanted to be that kind of monster, Valcar would have kept me. Veila's stomach turned. He kept you. Kairos was silent long enough that Veila thought he would not answer. Then he said, "He made me, or he tried. He thinks making monsters is the same as owning them." Veila hugged her knees tighter. "He will never stop." Kairos's gaze lifted toward the darkness above. "Then he dies." A new sound cut through the shaft, different from the drones. Human voices, echoing, shouts muffled by concrete. Veila's heart slammed. "Did you hear that?" Kairos's eyes narrowed. He pressed his ear toward a crack in the debris, listening. "My pack." Veila's throat closed. Relief hit her so hard it felt like grief. A pounding started somewhere above, rhythmic. Tools, metal striking metal. The rubble trembled slightly with each impact. Kairos raised his voice. "Here." A shout answered, distorted by distance. Then more pounding. Veila forced herself to stay still, every muscle trembling. If they pull the wrong piece, it collapses. Kairos stared at the debris, calculating angles and pressure like it was a fight he could win by thinking harder than physics. "They know, they have dug me out of worse." Veila's eyes stung again. "You let them dig you out, you let them be loyal." Kairos's mouth tightened. "They are not loyal, they are free, they choose." Veila stared at him, and the word free landed in her chest like a bruise. She had never been chosen without a price attached. The pounding grew closer. A slab shifted, dust pouring down in a thick cascade. Veila coughed, choking on grit. A narrow gap opened and cold air poured in like a blessing. Light spilled through, harsh and white. A face appeared in the opening, eyes wide. "Kairos!" Kairos exhaled. "About time." Hands reached in careful, more debris shifted. The gap widened. Veila tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Kairos moved instantly. He slid an arm under her knees and another behind her back, lifting her as if she weighed nothing. Veila's breath caught. "Put me down." Kairos did not. His voice was flat, controlled, but his grip tightened. "You cannot walk." "I can. You are shaking." Veila opened her mouth to argue, and then she saw the pack gathered beyond the opening, faces lit by work lights, eyes widening as Kairos carried her out first. Wolves with scarred hands, betas with bruised knuckles, alphas with wary stares that softened into shock. Veila felt her cheeks burn. Humiliation and something else warmer. Kairos stepped fully into the open space of the ruined elevator floor. Dust coated his shoulders. Blood marked his temple. His palm was bandaged, but red seeped through. The pack stared at Veila in his arms like she was a secret dragged into daylight. A young runner stepped forward, voice uncertain. Kairos is she. Kairos's gaze cut through them, sharp enough to silence the room. She is mine. The words hit Veila like a slap. Her heart lurched. No. Kairos looked down at her, and in his eyes there was hunger, yes, and rage, and a frightening kind of devotion. Not property, not a collar, not Valcar, mine as in chosen, mine as in protected. Veila's throat tightened. Do not decide for me. Kairos's jaw clenched. He lifted his head to the pack again. Anyone who touches her without permission loses hands. Anyone who talks about her like she is a thing loses a tongue. The pack went still. Veila stared at him, terrified by how easily he made the world obey him, and equally terrified by how carefully he had said permission. They moved quickly after that, through stairwells and smoke, down into the lower levels where the pack had secured a vehicle. Veila stayed in Kairos's arms the whole time, too weak to fight him, too aware of his heartbeat against her cheek, too aware of how safe it felt in a way that made her hate herself for wanting it. When they reached the safe house, the first thing Veila did was shove away from him and stand on her own, legs trembling. Kairos watched her, hands flexing as if resisting the urge to steady her. Veila drew a breath. Do not say that again, in front of them, in front of me. Kairos's eyes narrowed. What, that you are mine? Yes. Kairos stepped closer, stopping just out of reach like he was honoring an invisible line. Then give me a better word. Veila stared up at him. Alive, say I am alive. Kairos held her gaze. The gold in his eyes dimmed slightly. You are alive. Veila's breath hitched. Outside, the pack settled into guarded routines. Inside, Veila scrubbed her skin in the bathroom until it was raw, trying to wash off the heat, the fear, the memory of the collar cracking. She stared at her neck in the mirror. The mark was ugly. Real, no collar, no metal. She should have felt triumphant. She felt exposed. When she came out, a small meal waited on the table. Broth. Bread. Something sweet that smelled like honey. Veila hesitated. Kairos sat on the other side of the room, cleaning a weapon, pretending not to watch her. She ate anyway because her body demanded it. Every swallow made her steadier. When she finished, Kairos spoke without looking up. You need to tell me what Mortesia is. Veila's stomach turned. You already know what it does. I need to know how to stop it. Veila swallowed. You do not stop it, not easily. It is engineered. It learns. It adapts. Kairos's jaw tightened. And you? Veila looked away. I have seen it from the inside, in the Citadel, on tables. Kairos's voice sharpened. Did he test it on you? Veila's throat closed. He tested everything on me. Silence sat between them like a third presence. Then a screen in the corner of the room flickered on. One of the pack's techs had patched into a broadcast. The image stabilized into a news anchor, face pale, voice too controlled. A headline scrolled behind him. Umbra City Emergency Alert. Veila's blood went cold as she listened. The anchor spoke about Valcar, about a threat, about Mortesia being weaponized, about a deadline, about a demand to return stolen property. Veila's vision narrowed. Kairos stood, fast, crossing the room to slam his fist into the screen. The image shattered into static. Veila flinched. Kairos turned to her, eyes burning. He calls you property. He will kill the city if he does not get me, Veila whispered. Kairos's voice dropped into something lethal. Then he does not get you. Veila stared at him. You do not understand. I am not just something he wants. I am something he needs. He said it. He talked about heirs, about experiments, about new breeds. He thinks my body is a key. Kairos stepped closer. Your body is yours. Veila's eyes stung. Tell that to a city full of omegas in cages. Kairos's gaze hardened. I will tear the cages down. Veila laughed, sharp and hopeless. With what? Your claws. Kairos leaned in. His voice was low, controlled. With you, with your brain, with your hands, you do not just stitch wounds, you see patterns, you see poison and understand it. Veila swallowed. My blood might be able to make an antidote or a vaccine, not for everyone, but for your pack at least. Kairos's eyes narrowed. Then do it. Veila hesitated. If I do it and Valcar realizes, he will come harder. Kairos's smile was a flash of teeth. He is already coming. The next days turned into a blur of work and tension. Veila set up a makeshift lab in the safe house, using stolen supplies and what Kairos's pack could source. She extracted small amounts of her blood, careful not to weaken herself, mixing it with silver and stabilizers, building a crude barrier against Mortesia's spread. Her hands were steady because they had to be. Her mind was not. Every time Kairos entered the room, the air changed. Her body remembered heat. Her skin remembered the tile. Her throat remembered the collar cracking and his voice telling her to breathe. He never touched her. That should have made it easier. It made it worse. One night, Veila came out of the lab to find Kairos alone, standing at a window, looking down at the city like he was memorizing where to strike it. Veila spoke before she could talk herself out of it. If he really releases Mortesia, people will die who have never even heard my name. Kairos did not turn. He will not release it if I cut his throat first. Veila swallowed. You cannot just kill him. He has systems, protocols. He runs the Citadel like a machine. Kairos finally looked at her. Then we break the machine. Veila's voice rose despite herself. And if the machine breaks and releases poison anyway? Kairos stepped closer. His presence filled the space, but his hands stayed at his sides. Then you stop it. Veila laughed, trembling. You make it sound simple. It is not simple, he said, but you are not simple. Veila stared at him. Stop looking at me like that. Like what? Like you think you can save me. Kairos's voice dropped. No, like I think you can save yourself, and I am furious at anyone who tried to make you forget that. Veila's chest tightened. She turned away first because if she kept looking, she would do something foolish, something human. They fought anyway later over the plan. Veila wanted to surrender to Valcar to buy time, to stop the threat, to save the city from a mass release. Kairos refused with a violence that shook plates off the table. I will not hand you back to him, he snarled. Veila slammed her palms onto the counter. It is not about what you want. Kairos stepped close enough that his breath warmed her face. It is about what he will do to you. Veila's voice cracked. And what he will do to everyone else if he does not get me. Kairos's eyes flared gold. Let the city burn if it means you live. Veila went still. The words hit her like cold water. That is not love, she whispered. Kairos froze as if the word love was a blade that had slipped past his armor. Veila's throat tightened. That is possession. Kairos's jaw clenched hard enough to make a muscle jump. He backed away one step. Do not speak to me about love like you know it. Veila's hands shook. I know what I have never had. Silence fell, heavy and sharp. Kairos turned away, breathing hard, as if holding himself back from saying something that would ruin everything. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. "I will not be another caller." Veila stared at his back. "Then let me choose." Kairos did not answer. That night, while the safe house slept in rotating shifts, Veila lay awake staring at the ceiling. She listened to the city hum through the walls. She tried to imagine the faces of people who would die if Mortesia spread like mist through Umbra City. She tried to imagine herself walking back into the Citadel and smiling while Valcar touched her collarless throat. She could not decide which thought made her sicker. A faint click sounded near the window. Veila sat up, too quiet, too precise. The air shifted and her skin prickled. A sweet chemical smell threaded into the room. Gas. Veila's mouth opened to scream, but the gas hit her lungs like velvet. Her limbs went heavy instantly. She tried to stand. Her knees buckled. The door opened, and shadowed figures moved in like ghosts. Veila's vision blurred. She fought anyway, dragging herself across the floor toward the lab, toward her samples, toward anything that could slow Mortesia. A hand grabbed her ankle. Veila twisted, nails scraping skin. A voice whispered near her ear, almost apologetic. "You should have left when you could." Orin. Veila's eyes widened, rage cutting through the haze. "You!" Orin's face appeared in the dim light, expression tight. "You are too expensive to keep hidden. Valcar pays for miracles." Veila tried to spit at him, but her tongue felt thick. "He will kill you." Orin's smile was strained. "He promised he would not." Veila laughed once weak. "He promises a lot." Orin looked away for half a second, and in that flicker Veila saw it. Fear. He did not believe his own deal. A crash sounded in the hallway. A roar, distant, furious. Kairos. Orin swore under his breath. "Move." They dragged Veila out, down the stairwell, into the back of a transport van with blacked-out windows. Veila's last glimpse of the safe house was Kairos bursting into the corridor, eyes blazing, too late by seconds, like fate enjoyed cruelty. Veila tried to call his name. The gas swallowed her voice. Darkness took her. She woke to white light and the scent of antiseptic so sharp it felt like it was slicing her nostrils open. The operating room, the same one, the same steel table, the same monitors, the same cold hum of machines that kept people alive just long enough to suffer. Veila sat up too fast. Chains rattled, not around her wrists, around the chair. She was restrained like a tool, not like a prisoner. She looked down at her neck. No collar, her stomach dropped. It was worse without it because it meant Valcar would put something new there, something more creative. A slow clap echoed from the doorway. Valcar stepped in, and for a heartbeat Veila did not recognize him. His face was human, but only barely. One side of his jaw looked wrong, stretched, as if bone underneath had shifted. His eyes were too bright, too animal. Veins, dark and branching, crawled up his neck like Mortesia had kissed him from the inside. He smiled, and the smile did not fit his face anymore. "Doctor," he purred, "you look different without my jewelry." Veila forced her voice steady. "What happened to you?" Valcar spread his hands as if presenting a show. "Progress. My body does not accept imperfection. I pushed it. It pushed back." His shadow on the wall was no longer just a hint of a monster. It matched him now, bigger, hungrier, stuck halfway between man and beast. Veila's mouth went dry. "You cannot shift back." Valcar's expression twitched. Rage, then control. "You will fix me." Veila swallowed. "I am a doctor, not a magician." Valcar moved closer, and the air felt colder around him. You are both. You fixed my wolf, you broke my poison. You ran without a scent like you were born to disappear. You are my masterpiece. Veila's stomach turned. I am not yours. Valcar leaned down until his breath hit her cheek. Everyone is mine in Umbra City. Omegas belong to alphas. Alphas belong to power. Power belongs to me. Veila stared at him, mind racing. He was too unstable, too desperate. That made him dangerous, but it also made him careless. She needed tools. She needed access. She needed time. Untie me, Veila said, forcing herself to sound clinical. If you want me to work, I need my hands free. Valcar smiled. Still negotiating. Still pretending you have leverage. He snapped his fingers. An assistant approached, eyes down, trembling, and unlocked the chain on the chair. Veila stood slowly, keeping her posture steady. Inside, her heart hammered so hard it hurt. Valcar gestured to a tray of instruments. Do it! Veila stepped to the tray. Her fingers hovered over scalpels and clamps like greeting old enemies. She forced herself to look at Valcar's veins, at the way Mortesia had invaded him. The poison was not just a weapon. It was in him. It had eaten his ability to control his own body. There was no curing that, not in minutes, not in hours. Veila's gaze flicked to the IV stand beside him. Clear fluid, a drip feeding him something, steroids, enhancers, maybe a stabilizer, maybe the only thing keeping his heart from exploding. She breathed carefully. Lie down, Valcar's eyes narrowed. Do not order me. Veila met his gaze and let some steel into her voice. If you want to stay alive, you lie down. For a moment, something like amusement flickered in Valcar. You learn to speak to alphas. Veila did not answer. Valcar lay back on the table, coat discarded, chest rising and falling too fast. His skin was hot, feverish. Veila picked up a syringe. Her hand did not shake. She filled it not with medicine but with air. A simple thing. A cruelly simple thing. Veila stepped close as if preparing to inject a drug to stabilize him. Valcar smiled up at her. There she is, my good girl. Veila's mouth went tight. Hold still. She plunged the needle into the IV line and pushed. Air slid into the tube, invisible and deadly. Valcar's smile faltered. What did you? His breath hitched. His eyes widened. His hand shot up, clawed fingers closing around Veila's throat. He squeezed. Veila gagged, vision narrowing, hands clawing at his wrist. Valcar's voice came out broken. You cannot kill me. His heart monitor spiked. Then, beyond the operating room walls, a sound rose. A howl that was not human. It shook the lights. It rattled metal. Valcar's grip tightened on Veila's throat, but his eyes flicked toward the door, fear flickering for the first time like a crack in his arrogance. The wall exploded inward. Concrete sprayed like shrapnel. A massive black wolf lunged through the smoke, bigger than any Veila had ever seen, fur like midnight, eyes like molten gold. Kairos. He hit the floor and the room seemed to shrink around him, as if the building itself wanted to back away. Veila sucked in a ragged breath, still half strangled. Valcar released her and rose, half shifting, claws lengthening, bones cracking audibly. Two monsters facing each other in a room built for surgery. Kairos attacked without hesitation. Valcar met him with brutal strength, enhanced and unstable, like a weapon that did not care if it shattered itself as long as it shattered everything else first. They crashed into steel cabinets. Instruments flew. Monitors shattered. Veila stumbled back, coughing, trying to breathe, trying to stay alive long enough to matter. Kairos's jaws snapped shut on Valcar's arm. Bone cracked. Valcar roared and slammed a fist into Kairos's side. Kairos skidded across the floor, claws gouging concrete. He rose again instantly, body shaking with rage. Valcar's eyes gleamed. "You were always too feral to own, so I decided to break you." Kairos lunged again. Valcar caught him mid-leap and flung him into the operating table hard enough to bend steel. The sound was sickening. Veila's stomach dropped. Kairos tried to stand. One foreleg trembled at an angle that made Veila's chest tighten with panic. Valcar stalked toward him, claws raised, breathing ragged, eyes wild. "This city needs an alpha who understands fear," Valcar hissed, "and an omega who knows her place." Veila's vision blurred not from tears, but from a surge of something that felt like heat and lightning at once. Her throat burned where Valcar had gripped her. Her neck burned where the collar had been. Her blood burned. Valcar lifted his claws to strike. Kairos bared his teeth, eyes glassy with pain and fury. Veila heard herself scream, but it did not sound like fear. It sounded like command. A force ripped out of her, vibrating through the air, through bone, through instinct. "On your knees." The words hit the room like a shockwave. Valcar froze mid-strike. Kairos froze mid-breath. Both alphas, both beasts, locked in place as if their bodies recognized something older than their pride. Veila stood there shaking, stunned by her own voice. She did not understand what she had done. Valcar's eyes snapped to her, horror blooming across his twisted face. "That is impossible," he whispered. "An omega cannot." Veila's voice came out low, raw. "You put too much of yourself in me." Valcar's lips peeled back. Rage and fear tangled. "You are mine." Kairos's eyes flicked to Veila. In that instant, even frozen, he looked like he was trying to crawl back to her with pure will. Veila's chest heaved. She forced the next words out, each syllable tasting like blood and electricity. "Let him go." The command snapped through the air. Valcar's claws lowered slightly, involuntary. Kairos moved, freed. He launched himself at Valcar with a ferocity that felt like a storm finally allowed to break. His jaws closed on Valcar's throat. Valcar gurgled, hands clawing at Kairos's fur, eyes wide in disbelief. Blood spilled across the floor. The monitor went wild, then flatlined. Kairos did not stop until Valcar stopped moving entirely. When it was over, Kairos stood over the body, chest heaving, muzzle dripping red, eyes empty with something darker than victory. Veila took a step forward, then froze. Kairos turned his head slowly toward her. His eyes were gold, but there was nothing human in them now. No recognition, no restraint, only hunger and blood and instinct. Veila's heart hammered. The black wolf took a step toward her. Veila did not run, her knees trembled, her throat burned. Her whole body screamed to flee, but she remembered the collar. She remembered the full moon threat. She remembered every time fear had controlled her. She lifted her chin, forcing herself to stand. "Kairos," she whispered. "It is me." The wolf took another step. Veila forced herself closer, hands shaking at her sides. "It is me, Veila." She said her name like a prayer and a dare. The wolf's nostrils flared. He leaned in, scenting her. Her omega scent rose, sweet and sharp, and beneath it something else now, something that felt like power. The wolf's gaze softened by a fraction, like a storm pausing. Veila swallowed. "Do not leave me." The wolf pressed his muzzle against her neck. Then pain flashed, sharp and hot. A bite. Not deep enough to kill, deep enough to claim. Veila gasped, grip tightening on his fur, and the world seemed to tilt. A rush of warmth spread from the bite through her whole body, like a thread connecting them from throat to heart. Kairos shuddered. His massive body convulsed, fur rippling, bones cracking, shifting. In seconds, the wolf became a man, kneeling on the floor, naked from the shift, trembling with exhaustion and bloodlust fading into shock. Kairos looked up at Veila, eyes still gold, but now filled with recognition. He stared at the bite mark on her neck, then at the blood on his hands. His voice broke. "I did that." Veila touched his face, fingers shaking. "You stopped." Kairos swallowed hard. "I almost did not." Veila breathed, trying to steady herself. "But you did." For a moment, they simply stared at each other, both breathing too hard, both alive in a room that smelled like death. Then a mechanical voice filled the Citadel, calm and merciless, echoing through the walls like a verdict. Self-destruct protocol initiated, viral dispersal in 3 minutes. Veila went cold. Kairos's head snapped toward the ceiling. What? Veila's mind raced. Valcar planned for his death. The voice repeated the warning. Veila turned, scanning the room. She spotted a control console on the far wall, partly damaged. Cables hung out like veins. She ran. Pain flared in her ribs, but she ignored it. Kairos moved with her, limping slightly, then forcing his body to keep up. Guards poured into the corridor outside, shouting, weapons raised. Kairos shoved Veila behind him and tore a metal tray off the wall, hurling it into the doorway like a shield. Bullets pinged off steel. "Go," he snarled. Veila's hands flew over the console, trying to access the system. A prompt flashed. Authorization required. Valcar biometric. Veila's breath hitched. "It needs his handprint." Kairos glanced back toward Valcar's corpse, eyes hardening. Veila's stomach turned. "No." Kairos did not hesitate. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbed a scalpel, and did what had to be done with brutal efficiency. Veila looked away as the sound of blade through flesh hit her ears. Kairos returned with Valcar's severed hand, blood dripping onto the floor. Veila forced herself to take it, fingers slick, and press the hand to the scanner. A beep, then a cold message. Genetic confirmation required. Subject must be alive. Veila's heart slammed. It is not enough. Kairos stared at the screen, then at Veila, anger and panic twisting together. Then what? The system voice continued counting down. 2 minutes. Veila's mind raced through every detail, every experiment, every injection, every time Valcar had used her like a living container. Her stomach clenched. A terrifying thought rose. "What if," she whispered, voice thin, "he left something in me?" Kairos's gaze sharpened. "What?" Veila swallowed hard. "He transfused his blood into me during an experiment. I thought it was to see if an Omega could carry an Alpha's enhancements. I thought it was just cruelty." Kairos stared at her. "You have his DNA." Veila's throat tightened. "Maybe enough for the system to recognize." Kairos's voice turned urgent. "Do it." Veila yanked a scalpel from the tray and sliced her palm. Pain flared, clean and bright. Blood welled up instantly. She pressed her bleeding hand to the scanner. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the screen flashed. Access granted. Veila nearly sobbed. Her fingers flew over the interface, overriding the protocol, shutting down the dispersal, triggering neutralization systems. 1 minute. The system resisted, warning messages stacking like threats. Veila slammed commands through anyway, forcing the machine to obey her the way her voice had forced alphas to freeze. A final confirmation blinked. Viral dispersal aborted. Mortesia neutralization engaged. The mechanical voice stopped. The sudden silence was almost louder than the alarms had been. Veila sagged against the console, shaking, blood dripping from her palm. Kairos grabbed her shoulder gently, steadying her. "We have to leave." Veila nodded, dizzy. "Yes." They ran into the corridor where smoke thickened and emergency lights flashed. More guards appeared. Kairos shifted partially, claws emerging, eyes brightening, body turning into a weapon again. Veila forced herself to stay close, to use the wall shadows, to move like she had learned in the Citadel. Quick, controlled, unseen. They reached a service stairwell, climbed, lungs burning, emerging onto a rooftop as the night wind hit their faces like cold water. Umbra City spread beneath them, neon and rain, alive and oblivious to how close it had come to dying. A helicopter thundered in, lights sweeping the roof. The pack. A ladder dropped. Kairos lifted Veila without asking this time, and she did not fight him. She was too tired, too relieved, too aware that she was bleeding and trembling and still standing. They climbed into the helicopter as alarms below began to wail louder, the Citadel shaking with internal explosions from damaged systems and sabotaged weapons. The helicopter lifted. Veila looked down at the Citadel, at the place that had been her cage, now burning and cracking like a dying beast. Kairos sat beside her, breathing hard, eyes fixed on the city as if daring it to try to take her again. Veila's voice came out small. "It is not over." Kairos turned to her. "No," Veila swallowed. "The city will want a new tyrant. People always do. They like cages if they think the cage keeps them safe." Kairos's jaw tightened. "Then they learn something else." Veila stared at her bleeding palm. "And Omegas?" Kairos's gaze softened slightly. "No more collars." Veila's throat tightened. "Promises are easy." Kairos leaned closer, stopping just short of touching her face. His voice was low. "Then watch what I do." A month later, the air in Lower Umbra smelled different. Still rain, still smoke, still desperation in corners, but also something else. Open doors. People walking without ducking their heads as much. Omegas moving in groups without chains, eyes still wary but no longer empty. Veila's clinic sat in a repurposed storefront, small and clean and loud with life. She had patients lined up before sunrise. Betas with broken bones. Alphas with scars they no longer had to hide. Omegas with bruises fading, asking quietly for checkups and contraception and anything that meant control of their own bodies. Veila worked until her hands ached. It felt good. It felt terrifying, too, because every day of peace felt like bait. Kairos visited often, always with guards at a distance, always trying not to look like a ruler even though the city had started calling him one. He never wore a crown, he wore scars. He held meetings in warehouses, not palaces. He listened more than he spoke. People still feared him. Some also hoped. Veila did not know which was more dangerous. That evening, after the last patient left, Veila locked the clinic door and leaned against it, exhausted. Kairos stood near her desk, watching her hands as she cleaned instruments the same way he had watched her in the penthouse, as if her hands were the only honest thing in the world. "You missed lunch," he said. Veila rolled her eyes. "So did you." Kairos shrugged. "I had meetings." Veila glanced up. "You cannot run a city on hunger and rage." Kairos's mouth twitched. "I have been doing it my whole life." Veila set down a tray, then paused. Her expression softened despite herself. "Sit." Kairos raised an eyebrow. "Still giving orders." Veila met his gaze, still keeping patience alive. Kairos sat, but slowly, like he was honoring the request, not the command. Veila washed her hands. The water ran pink for a moment from a small cut, then clear. She dried them, then hesitated, heart beating harder. Kairos watched her face. "What?" Veila swallowed. "I have been dizzy." Kairos went still. "From working," Veila's voice dropped, "and nauseous." A muscle jumped in Kairos's jaw. His eyes searched hers, suddenly sharp with fear that had nothing to do with fights. Veila pulled a small item from the clinic trash bin, wrapped in tissue, as if even holding it in her hands felt too intimate. A test strip. 2 lines. Kairos stared. Veila's voice came out thin. "It could be stress. It could be hormones. It could be nothing." Kairos stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. He looked like he was ready to tear the world apart again, not from anger, but from panic. Veila held up a hand. "Do not." Kairos froze, his breath shook. "Is it?" Veila swallowed. "I do not know whose." The words hung in the air like poison. Kairos's eyes flared gold, then dimmed again as he fought himself back into a human shape. "Valcar." Veila's throat tightened. "He said he would force it. He never succeeded, not like that. But he used my body for experiments. He put his blood in me. He put his poison in me. He did not need to touch me the way he threatened to still leave something behind." Kairos's hands curled into fists at his sides.